Welcome to Combat Zone with Ben the Bane Davis on Stadium.
Folks, welcome back to the Combat Zone. It's been a minute. I'm still your host, Ben the Bane Davis. On today's episode, we've got some action-packed segments. Lot of info, some behind-the-scenes stuff we didn't show you in the past couple weeks from our guy Ian Parker, PFL insider, ESPN betting analyst, as well as a big recap and breakdown of UFC Paris. Nasruddin Imavov, Caio Borralho, potential title eliminator between those two highly ranked 185ers. We'll recap all that action and some more news, right? Jon Jones at the VMAs. He gave a little bit of a weird interview on the red carpet that we can't not talk about. And I've got a little bit of a bone to pick with Cedricus Dumas, who is appearing on an upcoming UFC Noche card, and his financial mismanagement. Is it his fault? Is it not his fault? We'll get into it later on today's programming. But first, I got to tell you about my weekend. Got to tell you about the weekend. It was a very interesting one. So if you know, I've spoken about this a couple times on this show, Combat Zone. I was on MTV's The Challenge, Vets and New Threats, season 41 of that franchise. Great experience. And, you know, I will say this. The fan base for The Challenge has accepted and embraced your boy in very positive manners. In fact, it almost blows me away because, as you guys know with the Combat Sports fans, this demographic is moronic more often than not, very bigoted in many, many ways, and just overall not the kindest of folks or smartest, right? But the Challenge fans, they seem to be, right, a different stone that we're turning over. And I got to meet so many of them here in Phoenix because of a Challenge Mania live activation that I got to be a part of. So basically Challenge Mania, huge podcast, biggest challenge podcast in the world, hosted by three-time challenge champ Derek Kaczynski and his co-host Scott Yeager. They were in town and we got to do some really fun things. Got to throw out the first pitch at the Arizona Diamondbacks game on Saturday, which was great. We crushed the Boston Red Sox, sent them packing, and I got a custom jersey. They gave me a little the Bane jersey, which is fantastic. I don't own jerseys. That's the one that I own. So talk about a hell of a debut jersey. And then Sunday, we followed up what was a great MLB evening with the panel, right? So it was a big panel, then a meet and greet, and it was just unreal. You know, you don't maybe think of, right, how big a show is or how committed the following is until you've got a packed room at the Stand Up Live in Phoenix of Challenge fans that are just the nicest of people. It was really, really cool getting to meet so many of them, hearing, you know, the feedback and some people that were bummed that I left. And it is actually funny because obviously the guy that eliminated me, Derek Chavez, good friend, he was also a part of this panel, and our like meet and greet lines were right next to each other. So there were many instances of me throwing shots across the bow at the guy that eliminated me and sent me packing on season 41. But I'll just conclude with this on my weekend. Do hope that your boy gets to run it back. I've been chomping at the bit to get that call for season 42, but now after really being a little bit more ingratiated inside the challenge community, especially the local fans, makes me even hungrier to come back and do it bigger and better. And talking about bigger and better, let's get into the combat sports action from this weekend. UFC Paris. Now, the French MMA audience, I gotta say, might be the best in the world. The ambiance and energy in those arenas every time that they go to Paris is just unmatched. I mean, it really is crazy how they bring it every single time. And look, they got a solid main event. I think French fighters went 5-0, 6-0 on the weekend. Nothing but stoppages on the prelims. We tied the UFC record for most stoppages in an event. So action-packed, energetic audience. But a couple pinpoints that I want to go over. Caio Borralho had not been defeated for, I believe, a decade, right? 10 years of perfection. He, I think, was riding a 16-fight win streak, right? So he lost I believe his second pro fight way back in 2015 and has been immaculate since. That comes crashing down against Nasruddin Imavov. And what was an odd affair, right? He was slightly favored to win this fight, had a really excellent performance against Jared Cannonier, punishing the Killer Gorilla in the championship rounds of their main event and nearly had the stoppage, right? Somehow Jared survives to the decision. But to me, it was just a really significant effort that was better than Nasruddin's performance against Jared Cannonier. So coming into this main event, even though it was enemy territory for the Fighting Nerd mainstay, I expected more from Bahayo. And I don't want to use the word disappointed because that's not fair at all to him, but per his own admission, he just didn't have the energy that night. Didn't have the adrenaline, didn't fight like the fighter he knows he is. That's his words following the pretty, I would say, decisive defeat. 50-45 on some scorecards, 49-46. He just couldn't get anything going in these rounds. Nasruddin cruising in control and now continues his winning streak, which, he says after the fight, look, I want the title shot. I deserve it. He believes that no matter what occurs between Reiner De Reeder and Anthony Hernandez, it'll be in all likelihood a shot for Imavov, which I just don't know. I just don't know about that. Now, I'm not discrediting Nasruddin Imavov, right? His recent wins have been fantastic, right? Ever since losing to Sean Strickland, it has been, for the most part, outside of the no contest with Chris Curtis, just fantastic. Roman Dolidze, decision. Finished Jared Cannonier. Decision over Brendan Allen, who is a surging prospect. Finishes Israel Adesanya in round 2 in February of this year, and then now takes out, like I mentioned, the absolute immaculate for a decade, Caio Bahayo. It's impressive. I'm not saying it's not impressive, but in terms of what compels me more, I would have greater interest in this matchup with Reiner De Reeder and Anthony Hernandez, right? Hernandez wins over many of the same people. Alan Dolidze stopped Michel Pereira in their main event really impressively. And again, has just been perfect since losing in May of 2020 to Kevin Holland. So I don't know. And then when you think about Reiner De Reeder, this guy is the ultimate wild card, such a oddity of a mixed martial artist, had a storied, credentialed career before the UFC, now adding even more layers on top of it. Now, I will say this, RDR's pedigree inside the UFC, I don't think matches up to Imavov or Anthony Hernandez, but it doesn't matter at some point because he's coming off of a huge win over former champ Robert Whittaker, now in this main event opportunity. And so many fans would love to see a showdown between Reiner De Reeder and the awkward grappling, the unorthodox, submissions that he brings that clinch the body work that he has against a guy like Khamzat Chimaev or a guy like Dricus du Plessis, right? I think there was just more intrigue with RDR and Fluffy than there is with Imavov, despite Nasruddin having, 12 UFC fights compared to RDR's 4 or Hernandez's 11, right? So I don't know. I don't want to position this as we're skipping over a guy in Imavov who deserves flowers, had a great performance, but I just feel like he might need one more. And so for Nasruddin, I wouldn't hate to see a Dricus du Plessis matchup, right? I think that could be pretty exciting, give Dricus an opportunity to get back on the horse against a easily number 1, number 2 contender, undisputedly in the world, or Imavov that chance to take out another former champion and really put a little bit more of a stamp on that claim to a title shot. In the co-main event, we saw Mauricio Hufi, another fighting nerd, come up short opposite Benoit Saint-Denis. Now, BSD had a really tricky, I would say, last 2 fights. You had Hanato Moicano giving him a grappling masterclass, and then Dustin Poirier stopping the Frenchman in really emphatic fashion. That was Dustin Poirier's final electrifying stoppage inside the UFC. And I think there were just questions about what Benoit really was all about. Was he rushed too soon to the upper echelon? Can he really hang in the deeper parts of the division? I think he answered them to some degree against Hufi. Not that Mauricio is this top 5 talent, but he was a very big prospect. A lot of, I would say, anticipation for another stoppage like Hufi locked over on Bobby Green. And then we all learned that Hufi has no grappling, that there's no takedown defense, and it all boils down to a submission victory for Benoit Saint-Denis. Now, the question for me is, right, it's so impressive, and Hoofy had maybe a couple moments, but man, like that's a really big gap in skill for a top 15 lightweight talent in Mauricio Hoofy, somebody that does train at that Fighting Nerd gym with, granted, they are more strikers, but Bajalio's grappling isn't half bad. Carlos Prates's grappling isn't too bad as well. So it's just odd that Mauricio Hoofy really didn't possess answers, especially when you know that that's going to be what Benoit's skill set is, all right, what his approach is going to be boiled down to. So unsure if it's more of a, man, huge win, what a shutdown for Benoit, as it was a, oof, we finally find an area that Mauricio Hoofy is very sub-tier at. So what could be next for both guys? I mean, look, Benoit Saint-Denis, you are hanging on to the bottom of the division, but maybe a Michael Chandler, right, could be interesting. Maybe even a, I don't know, but Mateusz Gamrot could be an interesting one if you really wanted to get Benoit up in the mix in the top 10, or give Grant Dawson an opportunity to just inch ever so slightly up the top 15. For Mauricio Hoofy, I think anything unranked is on the table for him. He is a very exciting striker. I think a stand-up battle would probably make the most sense for him next. You don't want a prospect to drop too straight. And I feel, right, we've seen how he has this big grappling deficiency. Give him a little bit of time to address it. Maybe somebody that's primarily a striker but mixes in offensive wrestling as a secondary skill set could be the perfect opponent for him. I'm thinking maybe like a Terrence McKinney. Look, that's a big step up for Terrence McKinney. I know that he's the killer be killed, highlight machine in the unranked depths of the division. But I feel like that could be a good matchup for both guys. Either a really solid highlight reel, right, clip for Hoofy, or Terrence McKinney getting the biggest win of his career and stepping close to that top 15 ranking that has eluded him thus far. Couple other notables before I take it to Mason Jones and Oki Balaji. Paul Craig retired, right? Paul Craig is done. Somebody who has been such a staple of the light heavyweight division for some time, calls it quits following an elbow TKO to Modestas Bukauskas, who's been just unreal since coming back. Modestas, I've always had a bit of a fond spot for him. After his fight with Khalil Rountree, you saw that his knee was blown apart, and, granted, that's fair move from Khalil to target that. But whenever you see a fighter, right, gripping their knee, and you start having those questions about whether or not their career is going to be the same, and it looked like for Modestas it wasn't going to be. But now in this second crack at the UFC, he has just been brilliant, and this stoppage, the biggest one of his career. So excellent for Modestas, tough for Craig, but props for a great career. Somebody who had big moments, right? Choked out Magomed Ankalaev with 1 second less left on the clock. Only man to beat Ankalaev. TKO Jamal Hill, right? Breaking his arm and elbowing him inside the triangle position. He's had his moments, right? You cannot dispute that Paul Craig has had his moments, has made his mark, and will be remembered, I would say, fondly, which isn't something you could say for many fighters at times, right? Which we'll get to later on today's programming. I would say it's now time to talk about something that frustrated me on this card. And it really wasn't about UFC Paris itself. It was more so about some of the reaction online and those providing accompanying content. So Mason Jones and Oki Balaji go to war. Knockdowns on both sides, fun firefight. Mason Jones able to come back, turn the tide, and secure the stoppage. Mason Jones, another guy who in his first stint inside the UFC dropped fights to David Onama, Ludwig Klein, then was released, right? He was signed at 26, a little maybe too soon for the Cage Warriors prospect, departed the division, returned to Cage Warriors, went 4-0, now is back and has won 2 straight. Great for Mason Jones. And a fun fight from Oki Balaji. Really liked that effort from him and had his moments. But what frustrated me is something I saw online from one of the bigger streamers in the world, which is Aiden Ross, and his, I would say, reaction to this fight in total. So let's take it to Aiden Ross, who had $500,000 on Oki Balaji.
Oh my! Oh! Oh my God! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him!
Relentless.
It's over. It's over. It's over.
That's it, yeah.
Like, bro. But like, chat, listen, bro. Like the first 30 seconds of the fight, look at you. Not, bro, you're on peds, bro. You're on peds.
I think you know exactly where my criticism is going to be levied. It's like this normalization of just beyond immature behavior. This is a person who does not give much of a about the sport. I bet he had no idea who Oki Balaji was before the card even started. And you just see these overly superficial and animated reactions, jumping up and down like a toddler, screaming, kill him, as Oki is delivering some ground and pound. And then as the tides turn, right, Mason Jones gets the better of his opponent. You see Aiden defeated, bet is blown, and he instantly pivots to that guy's on PEDs, that guy's cheating, that guy's on steroids. That's not fair. When in reality, what played out was the most fair thing in sports, right? Your opponent got a little too overzealous, couldn't finish the job. I turned the script right back on him and get it done. That's as fair as it gets, right? It's just so annoying to me that we have normalized this type of behavior. And I've seen a lot of pushback and negative reception to Aiden in this moment online for good reason. But it really is gross to me that we have carved out a comfortable spot for these people to exist within this framework and feel comfortable acting like a baby online for their thousands, millions of fans when they're getting these unreal betting sponsorships. And it's all fake. It's all completely fake. You think Aiden Ross put $500,000 of his own money on a fighter he likely knows nothing about? You're joking. You're joking. It's all make-believe. And it's almost one of those spots where can you hate the player if it's the game that's enabling all of this, right? And I think my answer to that is yes, I can hate both. I can hate both equally as much. And so for Aiden, I just, look, I get if you want to be excited. I get if you want to be, enthusiastic about something and play moments up. But it's just this, again, normalization of immature behavior. Screaming, jumping up and down, yelling, kill him is not, I'm sorry, that's not etiquette that I want in this fan base and community. And maybe I'm being a bit of a here, right? And trying to police people. Hey, everyone's entitled to do what they want to do. I'm also entitled to call it out and state how stupid it is, especially when the framework for this is a fake betting sponsorship that is completely meaningless. But all right, I've about it enough. Let's talk about another individual who I think gets a little bit of karma. So Harry Hardwick accepts a fight on short notice against Cowie Fernandez, who is an unranked UFC lightweight. This is his big debut. He's the brother of George Hardwick, who is a hyped-up prospect inside mixed martial arts. Harry Hardwick goes into this fight, gets leg kick TKO'd very quickly, very easily by Cowie Fernandez, and leaves in a wheelchair. Now, I would be empathetic. I would say, hey man, Harry, you accepted a fight on short notice, up a weight class, dog mentality, anybody, any place, anytime, and maximizing the moment to get a UFC opportunity. I would give him the props for that. If there wasn't this video of him talking about Anthony Smith, I believe this was on TikTok. He was creating a reel off of somebody's comment that said he looks like the former UFC title challenger, Anthony Lionheart Smith, and he had some unbelievable things to say. So let's play the Harry Hardwick clip on Anthony Smith.
Are you on crack? I take personal offense to this because Anthony Smith is probably the fighter in the world right now. He has the least appropriate nickname. He gets called Lionheart despite every fight he goes into a fetal position on the floor and just sort of cowers. He gives up but like lets the fight keep happening and people give him praise for it. He's terrible. Don't you agree, Paul?
He's absolutely
And he's a idiot for not just taking the DQ win and running away with his money. Moron. And all of his takes as an analyst are as well. Anthony Smith.
Look, you're at that time when he made that video outside the UFC looking in. This is a dude who made it to the top of the mountain and fought Jon Jones, the consensus greatest of all time in most people's estimations. And what are you doing? You're sitting on him and acting holier than thou, right? Criticizing his decision. He's a moron for not taking the DQ and stealing the bag, right? I don't know. I mean, look, Harry, you saw how the DQ title win works for Aljamain Sterling, right? Most people, I would say, didn't believe in his title winning effort, and he got online, ridiculed for months. I think Anthony recognized, like, look, this isn't the move, even if maybe there were reasons to do it. So either way, not to get in the weeds on it, but it's just an odd thing to put out there from Harry Hardwick, who, again, came up short very quickly in his UFC debut and did not look ready for this promotion. You're entitled to talk on a guy who took out 2 UFC champions in Rashad Evans and Shogun Rua, took out 2 UFC title challengers in Alexander Gustafsson and Volkan Oezdemir. You're entitled to try and on him, but kind of comes back to bite you when you get your handed to you by an unranked lightweight inside the UFC and get sent home in a wheelchair. So for Harry Hardwick, how about less talking, more training, and get back to the drawing board? Because at present, Anthony Smith has done a hell of a lot more than you inside your career. All right, last one before we take it to some interesting stuff is Jon Jones at the VMAs. So Jon Jones appeared at the Video Music Awards and was on the red carpet and gave kind of an impromptu interview, which is what occurs at red carpets, right? You walk by the press, you stop for some questions, and he just had a few weird things to say. So let's take it to Jon Jones on the red carpet of the VMAs.
Are you retired?
I am not retired. I'm actively training 5 days a week, and I'm in the UFC's drug testing pool.
Great. And what's the status of the fight at the White House?
I don't really know. It's kind of out of my control right now. I'm training for the event. I'll be ready for the event.
Are you ready? Because you turned down $30 million to fight Tom Aspinall after accepting it and then immediately reneging on that within, 48 hours, right? You held on to this title for so long, don't have a reputable defense to your name at 265 pounds. And I it's hard for me to think you're not retired. It's hard for me to think you're not retired. I think you're done. Because otherwise, you got what you asked for with Tom, and you still said no. So actions versus words, we all know which one speaks louder. If you weren't retired, you would have already competed against Tom Aspinall. You can't cherry pick anymore, Jon. I'm sorry. But what's been extended to you in the earlier stages of your career, the Shogun Ruas, right, and these legends who were accepting matches against you, you aren't doing the same, right? Having the cake and eating it too. So he can say all he wants on the VMAs, the red carpet, about training and not being retired. But Dana White has publicly clarified several times that he cannot trust Jon Jones to headline, even participate on a big card anymore. Now, he should have had that epiphany a couple of years ago, right? I remember, I think it was, 2018, UFC 232. Jones tests positive. They have to move the entire event to a different state to deal with an athletic commission that would overlook Jones's actions so that the pay-per-view could occur. That is probably when Dana should have realized, okay, I'm done slotting this guy in for big opportunities. It took a couple more years, right? But I don't know. It's been clear that Jon can't be trusted with that type of responsibility. Finally, Dana gets on board with it. And when he does, Jones makes an even greater effort in the media to clarify he's not retired. He's been training. He's still chomping at the bit for a fight that he turned down, right? This UFC White House card, I've spoken about it extensively. We'll see if it occurs. I know they're trying to do testing behind the scenes, And look, they've pulled off great shows in the past, but I have my own questions and skepticism, right, that it even occurs. But let's say it does. Jon Jones won't be anywhere near it. Jon Jones will not be on the UFC White House card. He won't be on the earliest prelim, and he sure as won't be the main event. So for Jon, it's just one of these things where I wish desperately that the alignment between his words and actions happens. But the more we see, right, the more he's shown over the last however many years is that that's just not the case. So for Jon, enjoy retirement because it is over. And talking about over, it's time for me to be done yapping. We've got some more fun things coming up on the show, some interesting words from our guy, Ian Parker, and a bit of a breakdown on Cedricus Dumas, his self-inflicted financial issues. And we're also going to be going over the dark horse in each division. I will be highlighting one person in the top 15 of each UFC weight class who I think presents the biggest problem for the current reigning defending champion. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned here on Combat Zone. So much coming up next. Folks, welcome back to the Combat Zone. Ben the Bane Davis here, and we've got an interesting story emerging from one Cedricus Dumas. Now, he's a UFC middleweight. He's 3-3 inside the promotion. He will be competing at this upcoming UFC Noche event against Zach Reese. So, sharing a card that has such cultural significance, meaning for the promotion, same date as Canelo Crawford, big day in combat sports. For a guy in Cedricus, but he gives us kind of the alarm bell that, things aren't fantastic, underneath the top layer. He states, this is the price of being an adult and paying legal actions and stuff in your life. Sharing a photo of his Wells Fargo, it looks like the portal on his phone, says he's got about $13 in his Premier checking account, right? I hate to hear people say people don't struggle at a big scene. Yeah, y'all can laugh about it. I'm just giving y'all something to laugh about. Really weird from Cedricus to provide this insight, right? And, the knowledge of his financial situation, because I don't think I asked, and I don't think anyone else did, right? And it'd be one thing if, right, he's down on his luck and this is his debut big opportunity. But this is a guy who's fought 6 times in this promotion, has 3 victories. So he's gotten those show win bonuses half of the time. And so for him to have completely eliminated the bank account, to end up with only $14 ahead of this big, featured fight at UFC Noche is just odd. But that's when you remember that Cedricus Dumas isn't just the everyday, average, positive guy, key, big supportive pillar in whatever community. That's when you remember he's been arrested 15 times in the last 11 years. As recently as April of 2025, the charges that evening were felony home invasion robbery, felony possession of a controlled substance without a prescription, misdemeanor battery, felony possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, and several other charges. So this kind of, I don't want to say plea from Cedricus to gain sympathy and pity, it gets a bit wayward, but it's odd to be arrested 15 times in the last 11 years and then try and turn that into some sort of this is the price of being an adult. This is the hoops that we all must jump through. No, Cedricus, it's almost tailored to you and your consequences of the actions you've committed, right? I'm sorry. I don't want to be the ethical police, the moral police this episode, but I just don't think that there's some people that should be complaining about much, right? A guy who's been arrested 15 times, likely going to have financial problems. And hey, if you don't want to have financial issues, how about you stop getting arrested? How about you stop breaking into people's home with a weapon? How about you stop possessing controlled substances without prescriptions? That might be a good starting point. That might be where I direct you to alleviate some of these financial expenses that are weighing down your bank account. No, Cedricus, you're not giving us something to laugh about. Yeah, people can laugh about it. I don't think that's what people are doing. I think it's just correctly observing that you are an individual who is seemingly incapable of altering your behavior. And now you want to moan and complain about the beyond obvious consequences of such moments. It's not really like um, a mystery, right? That you'd have these issues. And also, it's not something that, oh, happened once. I made a mistake one night. I made an oopsies. Now I'm rehabilitated and have corrected my behavior, my surroundings. No, you've been arrested 15 times in 11 years. That's averaging over once per year, Cedricus. I do not have sympathy. I don't have pity. And honestly, like, I don't think you should be fighting in the UFC. 3-3 inside the promotion. You've been finished in all of your losses and haven't really beaten anybody noteworthy or exceptional. Dennis Tululin, 11-9 overall, your most recent win. Cody Brundage, your first win in the big show, 8-4. And Brundage, not somebody that's really considered high caliber. So I just don't, I can't have sympathy and pity for everybody. I reserve that when it's necessary and it makes sense. For a guy in Cedricus who's been arrested 15 times in 11 years, and all these charges are heinous, right? As recently as April 2025, I'm not going to sit here and laugh at your financial problems, but I'm also not going to care. I'm not going to care. Because clearly you don't prioritize changing your behavior and becoming a different person. So show screenshots of your bank account and the $14 you have left. It does not matter to me. I'm going to, allocate what I give a shit about elsewhere. So, oops, sorry, Cedricus. Again, you don't want to have financial problems. How about you stop getting arrested? Okay, talking about some tough times. Let's get into a more positive topic, which is the dark horse in each UFC weight class. So this is a constant point of conversation, I'd say, in the community. Who in the top 15 is the biggest threat to the champion, right? And I figured on today's piece of programming, I'd give just a little bit of a thought on all the weight classes inside the UFC at the moment. So let's start at the smallest. UFC flyweight champ Alexandre Pantoja. The cannibal is tremendous, right? He's lapped the division in many ways. But I think if I were to cite one 125er as the biggest threat, it could be his upcoming matchup with Joshua Van. I think that Josh Van might not have the grappling acumen, right, to withstand Pantoja, but the volume that Josh throws, the forward pressure, the aggression, is something that's gotten to Pantoja in the past, right? He is hittable. He sometimes, I would almost say, rests on the laurels of his durability, tires out his opponent, and then wants to take over. Against the guy in Josh Van, who I think has pretty deceptively good cardio, that's not going to happen. The question is, can Josh evade the grappling, have some anti-grappling tools and tricks? That remains to be seen, but I think the dark horse is the man he will be facing next. All right, for Merab Dvalishvili, who is the individual in the 135-pound weight class that can take out the champion? It's hard because I don't think it's going to be Corey Sandhagen. I love the Sandman a ton, but his performance against Umar Nurmagomedov leans to me that he just won't be able to get it done against Merab. The offensive grappling from Merab will at some point get Corey down and then repeatedly plant him onto the canvas. So I think who could be a great foil for the champ and unravel him is a guy in Mario Bautista. Now, listen. I get that there is going to be criticism, but I think Mario Bautista has such a strong grappling base, has really come leaps and bounds in the grappling, and is able to put fights where he wants them. He dictates the pace. He dictates where the fight's playing out. He's done that so effectively in his last couple of outings. Against a guy like Merab, that's a crucial key. you need to be able to be in the driver's seat. You can't let Merab get in control. And I think Mario Bautista could present some problems in the event that he makes it down the line. Okay, let's take it to the featherweight division. Alexander Volkanovski, his biggest threat at this age, right? Quite advanced for a champion in the lower weight classes. Right, it'd be easy to say Lerone Murphy. It would be so easy to say that his next title challenger would be his, biggest problem. But I don't know. I think maybe a guy like Yusuf Zalal could have just a bit more of an edge because of that length, the height. This renewed version of Yusuf Zalal is dangerous, and he's just burning through people. So I think Lerone Murphy, right, fantastic fighter, wouldn't be the most shocking thing if he beats Volk. But let's say Volk gets by him. I think the next big test is going to be Zalal. All right, in the lightweight division, Ilia Topuria, currently the champion. I think it's easy to say Islam Makhachev, right? That's the biggest threat to the current title holder. He's already beaten Max Holloway, already beaten Charles Oliveira. Can't imagine Gaethje or Hooker would present many problems. Paddy Pimblett's interesting in that he has such a big frame for that weight class, and Ilia coming up from featherweight. Paddy literally trimming himself down to 155. I'd like to see it play out, but at the same time, I don't think Paddy would withstand the power of Topuria. So yeah, Islam Makhachev. All right, in the 170-pound division, Jack Della Maddalena, who gives him the biggest test, the biggest threat? Man, I kind of am torn between a few people. I think Michael Morales is such a weapon at 170 pounds, such length, great power. But I don't know. I'm gonna swing on Ian Machado Gary. I think that Ian Gary is evolving in front of our eyes, adding so many different wrinkles to the game. And yes, he did come up short to Shavkat Rakhmonov, did have some tricky territory in the fading moments against Carlos Prates, but I just think that Ian Gary's stand-up versus Jack Della's boxing would win that stylistic exchange. So for 170, we're going to roll with Ian Machado Gary. In the middleweight division, Khamzat Chimaev, who gives the champion, the Wolf, the biggest issue. It's hard because you've got some really good fighters at middleweight, but the big thing for me is who can nullify the grappling. And I want to swing on Anthony Hernandez. I think Fluffy's submission game is so complete. I think that defensively, he's incredibly well-rounded. And striking-wise, I mean, this kid's just a nonstop Duracell battery bunny inside the striking sequences. So I don't know if the cardio would hold up against Chimaev. I don't know if he could withstand the strength in Boris's grappling. But if I were going to highlight one person, I would go on the number 6 ranked middleweight Anthony Hernandez. All right, 205 Magomed Ankalaev, who gives him the biggest problem, the most issues. It's a tricky one because Ankalaev has looked really complete for most moments. But I'm going to go with it's tricky. Let's go with Jan Blachowicz. I think if they run it back, if Jan Blachowicz got another crack at Magomed Ankalaev, he would be able to win and make it more decisive. I thought Jan fought that fight perfectly. Thought he had Magomed confused, and I'd love to see Jan take one more crack at the champion. He's still in the top 5, but old man's got some work to do if he wants to get back to the mountaintop. All right, at heavyweight, Tom Aspinall, who gives him the biggest issue inside the division. Controversial take. Nobody gives Tom problems at 265. Not in his current top 15. He's already beaten most of them. I just don't see any issues coming Tom Aspinall's way. All right, women's strawweight, Zhang Wei Li. I know that she is departing that division, heading up to flyweight, but I don't know, because it's the same thing as a guy in Pantoja, where Zhang has just lapped this division, no issues whatsoever. So I guess maybe Lupi Godinez, right? Because I like Lupi's style, but I just feel like she would have the same experience as all of Zhang Wei Li's victims. Valentina Shevchenko in the flyweight division, who gives her the most problems? It's who I just mentioned. Zhang Wei Li coming up a weight class might be just a tad undersized, but she is such a complete mixed martial artist. And I think that Shevchenko is bit aged, right? A little bit on the older end, and the Grasso fights show that there are big weaknesses for the Bullet at this stage in her career. and I expect Zhang Weili to exploit them. So give me Zhang Weili, the dark horse heading up to flyweight to take out the champion. All right, finally, last but not least, in the women's bantamweight division, Kayla Harrison, who gives the former PFL champion turned UFC champion problems. Difficult to say. Very, very difficult to say, because I look at 135 pounds and I just don't really see anybody that is going to be able to hang on the ground with Kayla Harrison, right? I think it'd be interesting to see an Eileen Perez fight, because Eileen has such strong grappling in her own right, but I don't think that she does anything to the champion Kayla Harrison. So while there are a couple divisions here that I'm expecting washes and dominance and nothing but ease and some title defenses, there are a couple, I would say, more creative selections made for the dark horse in each division. Hope you enjoyed that one. Now, it's about time that we send it to our guy, the PFL insider and betting analyst, ESPN's own Ian Parker, for some more insider action on the PFL and the world of combat sports. It's interesting that Dalton maybe had that takeaway from the main event, which is, I'm going to get cut now. I don't think PFL has a track record of that. I mean, Ray Cooper III has had the ups and downs, and PFL has let that career play out. There are instances in the UFC where, hey, guy will go 0-2, 1-1, and then get bounced. But your thoughts on that? I feel like the PFL really does stick by their guys.
They do. I think it was more, he was just emotional at that point.
Yeah.
It was more along the lines of, I think he felt that he did so much buildup and talked so much, like he was essentially playing the heel and the good guy at the same time, right? Like, because no one really, outside of Fabian Edward fans, no one was really disliking him for his confidence or his cockiness, however you want to take it, right? I think we've all learned at this point that MMA in general, unless you are absolutely dominant, someone like a Shavkat Rakhmonov, right, who doesn't need to talk because he finishes and does that, selling is now a part of the sport, right? I'm not saying to go down the road of WWE or AEW and go full pro wrestling, but to build up fights, especially with the PFL, where this year was a very important year for them, and it's not done. There's a couple of really big cards coming up that have been announced. They've got really strong momentum, and I think he is somebody that really helped sell a division that didn't have a lot of depth and stars to it, right? But like, it worked. He did a great job doing that. It helped create a main event that was fun, and either which way, whoever won, people were like, look, for Fabian Edwards to win by a head kick knockout, now people are talking about him again. And after the way Costello Vanstinas beat Johnny Eblen, people are talking about Costello Vanstinas, right? Dalton's not a forgettable guy. So I think he was just going through the motions. There's no chance they cut him. If he called them tomorrow and said, I want to fight tomorrow, they would say yes. So I think he's just somebody who built himself up really high, which he should. And he was just going through the hardcore motions, especially after getting kicked in the head. Like, definitely has a concussion, right? I mean, he had his whole family out there waiting for him. So it was tough. But, just like anyone else who's lost in this sport, you've been around the sport long enough to see, it's, sometimes those losses make you better along the way. And that's going to be for him to figure out. So, and I think he'll be just fine.
Such great stuff from our guy, Ian Parker. Cannot wait to hear more from him after the break. Make sure you stay tuned here on the Combat Zone. He is a PFL insider and on-air talent. He is a ESPN betting analyst, one of the leading voices in the combat sports scene. Let's kick it back over to our guy, Ian the Duck Parker. One more thought on the Hollywood event before we take it to some of those aforementioned big bookings. Nurmagomedov Hughes 2, absolutely a topic we'll touch on. But following that head kick knockout, there were a couple interesting maybe camera choices. Dakota Ditcheva, Dalton Rosta's girlfriend, getting some prime time reaction. How did you feel about that? I never like seeing that. I mean, I feel you don't need to highlight the family and friends watching, their own get finished.
Our head producer even said to me after, goes, I was a little thrown off if I was going to do it or not. I mean, you know what I do find funny though, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of people just want to hate on the PFL, just to hate on the PFL. And as this tournament went on, people were having a hard time finding ways to be negative because the fights were fun. a lot of the people that won to continue the changing of the guard happened. The Thad Jeans, just like a lot of this stuff was going on. It was a good season. Look, I think the reaction part of this sport with seeing it sometimes also is what makes the sport special. I think people are so used to seeing the reactions from like, oh my God, and they don't see the other side of it, like the, oh my God. Right. And I don't think it was insensitive. I think it was more about because it was Dakota more than anything. I think the camera was on her, not because they were expecting a knockout and they just happened to capture that moment. And I think it was more to maybe humanize the situation a little bit. Maybe I'm trying to defend it. I don't know. I'm not, for it or against it. I'm kind of impartial to it because I could tell you there are times where the camera was on me and they didn't show it, where if I pick someone, like I'll give you an example. This was hilarious. I wasn't on that much in between the fights. There was a lot going on. And Bryce Meredith I think it was 1-1 going into the third round. And I tapped into my producer. I had the talk back button and said, hey, could you throw it to me? We have a really interesting betting situation. He's like a plus 650 and he's clearly winning and the tides are turning. Throw it to me. So they throw it to me and I'm like, listen, Bryce Meredith just went from a plus 650 as we are talking now, a minus 135, and he's in a dominant position. If you guys want to take him now's the right time. The minute the camera went off me, they stood back up, dude gets knocked out. So if you would have seen my reaction, right? Now, again, I'm not, he's not family, he's not a friend. It's not, but I'm just saying that I think if it wasn't Dakota with her popularity and they chose to kind of publicly announce their relationship on the walkout. So maybe it was more of a storyline play. I don't know. I mean, I do think it's funny that people were kind of like pulling at that. Like there was so many good moments and they're just like, yeah, head kick knockout. Yeah, shoot face won by finish over a brawl. But let's talk about should the PFL have put the camera on Dakota while her boyfriend got knocked out, right? It's like, come on, listen, it happens. Dalton's fine. She's going to be okay. It's,
Well, that's the thing is she is like one of, if not the biggest star in the PFL. Of course, there'll be a camera on her. And in those split-second decisions directing inside the truck, it's like, well, why not? Every time you see a college football coach reacting to a fumble or a play gone wrong, he's ripping the keyboard in half, screaming. It's part of sports, I guess. Would
have people said the same thing had it been the other way around and Dalton would have, because what would have happened, right? If Dalton would have knocked out Fabian, guarantee you we would have I'm not production. They would have showed Leon Edwards because of his name, his reaction to the loss, right? Would people been like, oh, do they really have to show Leon, putting his head down after the loss? It's whatever at this point. Again, I don't have a choice in that matter. I didn't even actually see it when they show that. I saw it like yesterday on social media because someone else made a comment on it. And I'm sitting there. It's like, can we just enjoy that there's a second promotion out there, all right, that has shown this season they can develop talent, they can develop fighters, put on good fights, the pacing was better, right? And, if there's no UFC on it, it's not conflicting. You don't have to choose one or the other. It's like, dude, fights were good. Let's just enjoy it.
Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to the Combat Zone today. Massive thank you to PFL and ESPN talent Ian the Duck Parker for gracing us with his presence in the booth once again. Hope you enjoyed all of the action from today's episode. We will see you next week, 9 p.m. Eastern here. Don't go anywhere. It's the Combat Zone.